Welcome to the Constructing Mindsets podcast. This podcast is about having real, honest conversations and shining a more positive light on the construction industry. Hearing from people across the trades, on-site and in leadership roles. It also connects with the wider work I do, supporting site leaders and managers, improve communication, mindset and problem solving through online modules, in-person workshops and coaching. Thanks for joining us on this one. Let's get into the episode. Well, today's episode is a great one for anyone working in residential construction. We're talking leadership on site, communication, and what it really takes to deliver projects while managing people and pressure. My guest today is Chris Duke, a project manager with over 20 years experience across the New Zealand industry. He has worked on everything from architectural design homes through to sales, site supervision, and now leading large-scale residential projects. Today we're going to unpack his journey, what he's learned along the way, and what actually makes a difference day-to-day on site. So thanks, Chris, so much for joining us tonight. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Vinny. Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate being asked to come on your podcast, and I've enjoyed listening to the previous podcasts, and I think what you're doing is awesome in terms of shining a spotlight on our industry and quite a variety of people that are involved in the industry as well, which I'm sure will be interesting to the listeners.
Yeah, I think it's funny you say that. Yeah, the variety of people in the industry, because for people in the industry, you do get to meet and know people from all different walks of life and different backgrounds, whereas some of the other podcasts are kind of just builders talking to builders or architects talking to architects. So the idea to get different people in different industries but all tied into construction has been really cool. And yeah, now for you to come on with all of your sort of background and expertise, I look forward to sort of hearing what you've got to say.
Yeah, sure. No, that's awesome.
Perfect. So yeah, just to maybe take a step back, your journey through to sort of where you are today, are you able to walk us through some of those roles you've had and some of that career progression you've had till now?
Yeah, for sure. No problem. So my journey's been quite a cyclical journey. So I started off as a construction management cadet with Ebert Construction in the late 90s. There's sort of been lots of twists and turns along the way between then and now, but I have always remained within the New Zealand construction industry, as you sort of touched on, in different roles. So at times I've looked at the industry through different lenses. So yeah, to give you a little bit of an idea of what that journey was like for me. So basically, as a construction management cadet, I worked on a range of projects. So we worked on an apartment building in Parnell. We worked on a cool store in Takanini. So quite a range of different projects, which really gave me an awesome understanding of the industry and what it involves. And then from there, I ended up going to work for one of our engineering subcontractors, which is quite a good transition in a way, because I was able to use the fitting and turning and engineering skills that I'd developed in the Navy in that role. I was, still within the building industry, but went from a construction management role, being that it was, a junior role, a cadetship, into more of an on-site engineering role, which then over the years progressed into running or leading a site team, an installation team for that same company. From there, I went to work for Luvatech. So I was working for Luvatech for a number of years, and again, on-site installation work, in a van with a workmate and going to site every day, installing the product, which was cool. Yeah, it's a pretty nice product, and we got to see a lot of beautiful homes around, Auckland, Whitianga, Omaha, Manukau, all over the place, really. So that was cool. From there, my wife and I, we had a few young kids by that stage, and so I started to think a little bit more about my career and progression and sort of the direction I was going to make sure I could, provide for my family. And so I went off the tools and moved into a sales role with Luvatech, which was awesome. And that was sort of, a pretty interesting kind of transition, going from installing the product and being on site with a tool belt in a van to basically driving a computer, and sort of learning that side of the business and sales and going out and dealing with customers and showing them the product range and really getting into the nitty-gritty of the design aspect of the products and why we use what we use and where, and learning about win zones and engineering aspects of the products. That was awesome. Yeah, and then so during that time, my wife and I made the decision to move to Mangawhai. So with our young boys, so we moved up to Mangawhai, and I carried on working for Lubertech for a few more years, and then I ended up transitioning over to Carter's and working for the local Mangawhai Carter's as an account manager. Again, still within the industry, but now looking through a different lens again, working for a merchant, and yeah, it was cool, like Mangawhai was going gangbusters. We had the Tauriti, golf course underway, all sorts of residential builds happening, new subdivisions, new developments happening, and literally the material was just flying out the door. Like I could have been the worst salesperson in the world, and my numbers would have still looked pretty darn good. So that was good. And so during that time, my wife and I, we engaged one of the local building companies to build our first home. And so that was cool. We really enjoyed that process, and then lived in it for a few years, sold it. And then we thought, okay, right, for the next one, let's actually project manage it ourselves. I've acquired the know-how and the expertise and experience to be able to do that. And so that's what we did. So we designed and built our first home in Mangawhai as in ourselves. And then we also project managed my mother and father-in-law's build, which is right next door as well. So I really cut my teeth, I guess, as a project manager on managing those two builds. They were nice homes, but it was a struggle. It was a real struggle because I was working full time as an account manager for Carter's, and then I was also really hands-on project managing the two builds, and it worked out really well for our family. But it was a strain. It was one of those things that you kind of look back on and you think, man, that was a real test of how much can I take before I fall over type deal. It was like, man, that was you really realize at those times, you're probably not far from breaking point looking back on it. But yeah, it was also a really productive experience, and it turned out really, really well for us. So that basically got me back into project management, along this kind of long and winding sort of journey through the industry. And then from there, a few people actually sort of gave me a bit of feedback and said, hey, we think you'd actually be a really good project manager. Have you thought about, moving out from Carter's and actually coming on and working for us as a project manager? So, so that's what I did. So I went and worked for Westmoreland Homes in Mangawhai as a site supervisor. And so that got me back into essentially that sort of role, or sort of moving back into that construction management side. And then from there, I worked for Westmoreland for a good few years, and then ended up working for Signature Homes. So Signature Homes, North Shore and Rodney, awesome team there. We're building really cool design and build homes for clients in Matakana, the Shore, Whongaproa, Rodney, all around that sort of area. And yes, I really enjoyed that. And then through to now, I'm working as a project manager for Fletcher Living at Three Kings. So I'm running a large-scale residential project in the old Three Kings quarry, and so leading a site team. And yeah, it's a pretty busy, active site. We've got probably 40 tradespeople on site at any given time. And we'll likely be there for about the next 5 years. And potentially have built roughly 400 homes by the time we finish there. So yeah, so quite a journey.
Yeah, it is a cool project, that Three Kings development. Also, cool. Wanted to touch on your sort of how different roles have shaped your approach to your project management at the moment. Like, are you able to talk through sort of how going on the journey through different roles in the industry has sort of shaped how you're a project manager today?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's been a real source of strength for me in my role as a PM, because I've had such a broad background and worked in such a range of different roles within the industry. So I've learned, how to deal with people, how to get along with people. I've learned a lot of in-depth knowledge about the products and why we use them and how they're used, how to talk to architects, engineers, designers, through to the tradies up the scaffold, like just dealing with a whole range of different people within our industry, council as well. So yeah, I think it's been a real source of strength for me, and it's given me a quite a broad experience base to draw from. Yeah, and I honestly, I really love what I'm doing. I think it's super important to actually enjoy what you're doing, and often you enjoy what you're good at as well. So I think when you actually, like I've had quite a kind of a long and sort of windy road through construction, but I think where I've landed now is a really good sort of groove for me. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And kind of you briefly talked on communication and how you've sort of different ways of communicating with different people. Sort of how has that communication picked up for you throughout your career? Like obviously in construction, there's no kind of like, this is how you communicate with people, but like how have you developed your communication skills through your career? And like, what were you like when you first started compared to what you are maybe what you are like now?
Yeah, sure. Give you like a really honest and raw kind of glimpse into what it was like for me when I was first starting out as a cadet. So
Yeah.
my site manager, Carl Jones, bless his heart, so he used to call me Al Simers,
Okay.
and it was, it was one of those things, but it's always stuck with me. And so now, or I guess where I've got to now is I really make sure that I don't let anything slip if I can help it. We're all
Mm-hmm.
human, obviously, but
Mm-hmm.
so in terms of communication, like I really make sure that things get documented, they get communicated out to whoever it might be, a subby, a supplier, one of my team, potentially via email, text, whatever it might be, or in my my Outlook calendar, so that nothing ever gets missed. And so, for instance, I might be sitting on the couch at night, watching TV, and then something comes into my head, and I think, oh heck, I've got to make sure that X, Y, Z happens the next day. So now I'm in the habit of just opening up my phone, opening up my Outlook calendar, chucking it in there for tomorrow
Mm-hmm.
as a scheduled reminder. And then that way I can make sure that nothing ever gets missed. And then also when I go to bed at night, I don't have to worry about that thing because I've already taken it out of here. I've put it into my calendar, and I know that I can deal with it tomorrow. So that's been a real huge improvement. I mean, that's 25 years ago essentially that I sort of gained that nickname of Alzheimer's. But hey, that's just being on a building site. Guys, good sort of good humoured bit of sledging going on. But yeah, I think also from a communication perspective, just showing up consistently for your team, your subbies, your suppliers, be visible, make sure people can get hold of you as well. I think these days we've got into the habit of not wanting to speak to people on the phone. And I've noticed there's a real growing trend where people would rather text or email, and which I think is really important. Like you absolutely need to be able to document certain things, like if it's to do with scheduling, hey man, I'm just letting you know, blah, 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 and just confirming that we're getting you in here on Tuesday at 9 o'clock, those kind of things. Like you definitely want to document down, but also pick up the phone. Just especially if it's a priority, if it's pretty important on your list of things that are important, make sure you are actually picking up the phone, and conversely, make sure that you're answering the phone as well. I think I've noticed running the team on site that often it's actually easy to not answer the phone. It's like, oh, I don't want to talk to that guy. He's a pain in the bum or whatever, and so you let it go to answer phone, and then you'll send a text later or something. But I think honestly, email is obviously very important when it's needed. Text is a great way to have a record. But yeah, I think good communication looks like actually getting out and talking to people being visible, making sure that, particularly on a large site, making sure that the subbies can actually come and find you, like they're not just wasting time walking around the place, getting 1,000 steps up, trying to find the site manager. Make sure that you're there, you're visible, you're showing up for your team and for the subbies.
Cool. And sort of with, you sort of talked about multiple subbies and getting around site, potentially a few problem-solving examples coming up on such a large-scale sort of project there. How do you approach problems when things don't go to plan? Yeah, sort of what's your process on potentially a clash or an issue on site and sort of working through that?
So one thing that I've gained some awareness of recently is just to stop. Like we had an incident not long after I joined the feature team at Three Kings where we had a fairly serious health and safety breach caused by one of the steel riggers up on a scaffold that sort of climbed outside of the scaffold and sort of straddled two scaffolds and he had about probably a 7 or 8 meter drop below him. Because he was trying to reach a strop and sort of untie a piece of steel. Following some of the learnings that we got from that incident, I've kind of adopted that into my approach now to problems that arise on site where, like, don't be afraid just to stop, stop the process, reassess the situation, talk to the contractors, the subbies, the team members, and take another look at the situation and make an adjustment. Like, hey, things don't always go to plan, but there's always a solution, and don't be afraid that you're going to get, yelled at, made to feel like you don't know what you're doing or something, just by stopping. Just go, hey guys, that obviously didn't go to plan. Let's just stop and recalibrate. Let's have another look at this. So yeah, I think that's really important. Having that culture on site where you respect each other, like you've got the psychological safety on site. Like when we have our toolbox meetings, we often will say to the guys and ladies, hey, if you see something that you don't think's right, please speak up. You're never going to be judged or belittled for it. Like come forward and just put your hand up. And we always introduce our site teams that the subbies know who I am, who our site managers are. And if they don't feel comfortable talking to the tradesperson that they're looking at, then to just come and find one of the site managers and have a chat, just a quiet chat to them. So yeah, I think
Cool.
maybe just something else that I have been learning or become aware of when I was doing the feature building gear up course last year was the concept of red, orange, green brain. So have you heard of that before?
No, I haven't. I've done that course, but it might be an update from it.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes these concepts get sort of repackaged as or rebooted as, with different terminology, but essentially it's to be aware of when you're becoming upset or emotional or angry in a situation, and that's often when your brain starts moving into from green, which is what your brain would look like now when we're relaxed and we're talking calmly, and then you start getting a bit fired up because things aren't going right. There's a problem that's happened. Your brain starts going orange, and then it escalates further if the situation escalates into red brain, which is essentially you're just screaming and yelling and probably getting into a fight with someone, So it's just, the concept was awesome and I really enjoyed it. One of the key sort of takeaways that I got from the course was just having that awareness of when that happens and that your decision making gets impaired when you become emotional, when you lose your composure, when you go into orange brain or red brain, and your ability to actually make good sound decisions suffers from when you're in that state. So it's really important to have that awareness and to just calm things down. Like I was saying earlier, just stop the process, whatever it might be, and just let things simmer down a bit and work out what went wrong and then go again, make an adjustment.
And like, where does that where does that come from? Like, how have you got to that realization or that process? Doing the course, you obviously said that helped, 25-year career? Like, has that been something that's happened recently, or sort of where has that sparked from?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's come from working with people for a long time in our industry and actually understanding the industry, like having a really deep understanding of why we're doing what we're doing, what are the drivers behind it, what makes people tick, how to get the best out of our people as well and our teams. And I just know from experience and from doing things like the Gear Up course as well, that you get the best out of people when they're calm, when they can think clearly. You certainly won't get that from your team, when they're upset or angry. So I really enjoy working in a supportive, really positive culture, and that's what I always strive to build on my sites.
No, I think that's a great answer. Sort of talked about sort of your performance and team culture there. Kind of ties in good to my next sort of question here. You've worked with a lot of different teams over the years. What separates a high performing team or an average team?
Yeah, so I think embracing people's differences. I think one of the keys that I've learned over the years is that one of the secrets to building a high performing team is having people in there that are different. Like
Hmm.
different cultures, different backgrounds, different experiences, different strengths and weaknesses. And I think that, and having a good leader in a high performing team makes a big difference too. Like if you've got a leader that able to show vulnerability, is able to ask for help, is able to help empower his team, or her team, I think is gold. And having the those differences in your team.
Hmm.
I think that's the key. Different
Hmm.
backgrounds, different experiences, show vulnerability, and obviously a lot of support and care for each other as well.
No, perfect.
Yeah,
And
and a
kind of
common
awesome.
goal, right? You've got to have a common goal that everyone's working towards.
Like the overall vision of the project. Like for me, I think like ensuring the subcontractors or the tradespeople or even the other members in your team like know why you're at this project for the next like 5 years, for example. Like, what behaviors have you seen that lifts either teams or teams that you've been a part of up, and what behaviors kind of bring the teams down?
Going back a little bit to what I think makes a really good high performing team, is one of the thoughts that I had earlier was essentially creating a really positive environment on site through one step at a time. No shit talk. Like that's a real big one for me. Is I very intentionally don't talk behind people's backs. I really avoid any sort of negativity, and believe in leading by example. So if my team can see that, hey, I'm not interested in having a conversation with them about, what they think about, oh, mate, or this, or, like I won't even go there. And I think that really helps to build that positive environment. And so in terms of what behaviors lift a team, so really, what I sort of touched on before leads into this as well, in terms of making sure that your team feel empowered, valued, supported, listened to, and appreciated. I think those are real key drivers for, making sure that, your team feel good about what they're doing and they want to come to work every day. They enjoy being there because they know that they're going to feel good. And then the opposite to that really would be, um, toxic management. Having a toxic manager can pretty quickly unravel that good work and that positive energy on a team. So yeah, I think that's something to really watch out for, is if you have a manager that lacks empathy, self-awareness, if they micromanage their team, essentially that's the direct opposite to empowering your team, right? Gaslighting, cultivating a blame culture, all those sorts of things are real red flags that I think leaders, particularly in our industry, need to be aware of, have some self-awareness and check themselves, if like just having that reflection as well, and be vulnerable about it. Like if you think that you're doing any of those things, like just course correct and move back into that positive space again.
Perfect. Sort of, yeah, touching on sort of your maybe mindset and sort of resilience. Construction can be a tough industry, sort of long days, high pressure environment, potentially things not going to plan. Sort of how do you personally stay steady through the ups and downs, sort of things you do at work and maybe how you reset sort of after work?
Yeah, sure. Physical exercise is a really big one for me, and I know it's a shared sentiment amongst a lot of guys and girls in our industry. So yeah, so I start my day every morning during the week, 5 a.m., roll out of bed, running shoes on, and I go for a run down to the bottom of the hill, down to the beach, and I run back up. It's not a long run. It's probably just under 4Ks. I don't enjoy it. It's not a fun thing for me, but that's not the reason I do it. The reason I do it is because it's hard and it sucks, and it's a really good way to set my brain up and my I guess my mindset for the day, that I've started my day doing something really hard I didn't want to do, and I've done it. I've achieved it. So when I get into work an hour or so later, like I'm already ready to go. And I think that's really important to intentionally do hard things. And I think it really helps my mindset. It helps me when I'm in tough or stressful situations at work. Like what we touched on before, what happens when a problem comes up at work. Well, it's building that resilience and that strength in character and in your mindset, so that you can come to work and deal with these situations and not go straight away into red brain, because you've already built that mental toughness and mindset. So yeah, so that's one way that I work on myself to be able to deal with the pressures and the tough days. Yeah, and I think what's helped me to build resilience over the years is time in the industry. So you really can't replace time and experience, particularly in the construction industry. So that's really helped. Like going through ups and downs, tough times. Project managing a couple of private builds while I was still working full time. That was probably the toughest mental test that I've ever gone through. It was really tough. My marriage, the kids didn't see a lot of me during that time, but it was there was light at the end of the tunnel. It wasn't forever. It was just for 6 months or whatever it might have been. So I think it's just all of those collective experiences that build up to enable people in the industry to be able to deal with the tough times and build that resilience, and then hopefully be able to pass on some of that knowledge and experience to younger people coming through in our industry as well.
No, well, it's a perfect segue there because my next couple of questions are probably for advice for people advice for the next generation. So if somebody is coming into the industry sort of right now, so what advice would you give them starting out?
So stay at home for as long as you can. You'll never know how good you had it at home until you're gone. This goes to my son Flynn, my son Cohen, and my younger son Millen, who are all teenage boys. And so, yeah, but in all seriousness, like young people getting into the industry right now, if you've got the option, not everyone does. I didn't have that option. But if you have the option to stay at home, is one really big, bonus or plus that I'd recommend is stay home with mum and dad or mum or dad or whoever. And until you get yourself on your feet, because there's nothing worse than starting out in a new career and being stressed about being able to make ends meet, being able to pay the bills, being able to buy food, buy petrol at the moment, which is, as we know, ridiculously expensive. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's probably the advice I'd give for new people starting out.
Fair enough. And maybe just a bit of a mindset sort of tip that would maybe set them up for a long career in the industry.
Yep, definitely. So I would say spend some time working in different roles. So don't worry about the money side of things straight away, which kind of segues back to my reasoning behind saying what I did about staying at home, so that you don't have that money pressure on you initially, so that you have a little bit of flexibility to try a few different roles, like get some work experience, working for a sparky, working for a bricklayer, working for a carpenter, work for a drain layer for a few months digging drains. Just try to get as much exposure as you can before locking yourself into an apprenticeship, for instance, if you end up going down that pathway, and don't be afraid to put up your hand and say, hey, look, actually, I've given this a try. I actually don't think this is quite right for me. And then try something else. It takes a little while to find your groove in this industry. Often you don't know what you don't know. So, try different things, get the experiences until you feel like, hey, you know what? This is actually something that I enjoy doing. I enjoy the people that I'm working with here, and I can actually see myself making a career out of this long term.
No, perfect. All right. Well, we've got a couple more questions, Chris, but I wanted to do maybe some quick fire questions with you. So I
Sure.
got 5 quick fire questions here to bring us to a close.
Yeah, sure.
So the first thing that comes to your mind, so I think you've already kind of answered a few of these, but we'll just start with them. So early start or a late sort of finish for you?
So yeah, sure. So early start.
Yeah.
And
So you can get your
reasoning
run in.
is get home from work and still be able to get things done and spend time with the family. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
my
No,
preference
perfect.
there.
No, perfect. And for you, start or project handover? It's better.
So handover for
Yeah.
me. So I love seeing a finished home being handed to the new owners. That's my why. That's why I do what I do. I really love building things. Seeing a construction project come up out of the ground. To a finished home where I'm literally handing the keys to the new owner and just seeing the smile on their faces and the relief. That they've invested this huge amount of money and they've now got this amazing home to enjoy. So that's
No, perfect.
that handover for me is the
No,
is the
perfect.
most important part.
Nice. And if you've got to get something or get some communication over to somebody, is it your phone? Are you going to a phone call first, text, or email?
So all of the above. Email, text is a great baseline and record of the comms, but the phone call, like depending on the nature of the communication, if it's urgent, hey, phone call, give them a call straight away, have that discussion with them, make sure it's understood on that phone call what's needed, but always follow up with an email or a text message so that it's documented, because you never want to get accused of or called Alzheimer's. So you always want to make sure that that those conversations are documented.
No, perfect. And sort of one habit that improves performance.
I think appreciation. Just make sure you tell your team how awesome they are, how much you value them, watch the positive culture grow and the number of sick days decrease.
Perfect. One message to construction leaders.
So I'd say just keep moving forward and build. I feel like our industry's got into a real slump due to lots of various factors: housing market, lending, politics, wars, all big issues. But let's go, seriously, let's take the brakes off, let's pump things up, get some energy and optimism happening in our industry and get things moving.
Sort of final sort of question here. So if listeners take away one thing from this conversation, what would you want that to be?
So try to find your groove. And this is probably aimed a little bit more at younger people coming into the industry, or not even necessarily younger people, just anyone coming into the industry. Try to find your groove. And I know that it's not always forthcoming, especially when you're starting out. So don't be afraid to try different things, study jobs, directions, until it feels like you've found something that sticks. It's really important to enjoy what you do every day at work, and generally you enjoy what you're good at. So just try to find that thing. And I know it's sometimes a little bit easier said than done, but I think the key is just try to find your groove, and once you find that, keep working on progression and growth, which will help to keep you engaged, find your purpose, and stay in the industry.
Perfect. Well, yeah, it's been great, Chris, to catch up with you and meet you in person or online. Really appreciate you coming on and sharing your experiences. A lot of practical insights for people that hopefully they can take back to site when they listen.
No problem. Thanks, Vinny. Thanks for having me on. It's been great to chat to you.
That's it for today's episode of Constructing Mindsets. Remember, Every conversation is a chance to shift the culture of construction. Subscriptions and reviews are always appreciated. Be sure to reach out if you're needing to improve performance on site by upskilling communication, mindset, and problem solving.